This was big news over the weekend, the shocking Iowa poll from Ann Selzer. Nate Silver says a shocking Iowa poll means somebody is going to be wrong, either Ann Selzer and the New York Times or the rest of the polling industry. So you guys may have seen this. Strangely, Ann Selzer, who Nate Silver says is one of their highest pollsters, like one of their best, shows Kamala Harris winning 3 points in Iowa. Why? No idea. When she was being interviewed about this, she says, "What does D and R represent?" And everyone began ragging on her like, Democrats and Republicans? What do you mean? Don't you understand what's going on? And then the argument from the left is, well, no, she's right. It's just she's not going partisan. She's saying Trump versus Harris. The narrative that is emerging right now on the left, the reason why Ann Selzer was able to find these results is because she's not following the herd and that she's polling women. There are numerous narratives emerging where these guys in Iowa were like, I saw my wife having a meeting with all her friends and they said they were going to vote for Kamala Harris, and they're very serious about not liking Donald Trump. We're now looking at polls, not polls, but the return data on early voting showing that women are, I believe, 10 million more women than men have voted. It's about 54% to 44% of men.
Because we love doing paperwork.
Well, women are voting more than men, at least right now. Some are saying, well, men are going to show up on the day of. But the issue of abortion is being brought up by the left as a principal issue as to why Democrats may win this. I don't know who wins. I don't know, Jeremy, what do you think if this really is swaying people? Abortion, I think, is the number 5 issue.
Well, it's the number 5 issue in the way that people respond to surveys. It's definitely the number 1 issue if you look at Kamala Harris and the left's rhetoric going into the election. I would say that Kamala Harris is obviously on something like Valium, like she's a perpetually stoned. I'm actually not joking. I think that she's perpetually stoned. The only time that she has these moments of sort of clarity, just like the fog parts and an actual position appears, it's to advocate for the killing of babies. That's almost the only thing that she seems to actually care about in any real sense, and she becomes very passionate about it. And I do think that the left has done a very effective job over the last 70 years, and in particular over the last 20 years, of convincing women that the only way to truly be a woman is to be the opposite of what women have been throughout all of human history, which is, life givers and children nurturers. So I don't know. I think that there's a world where Kamala Harris wins 50 states. If the left figures out a way to turn college campuses into ballot harvesting operations, which has historically been impossible, but now in the era of mail-in, the ubiquity of mail-in voting is no longer impossible. If they haven't done it, they're going to do it in the next election, and we have to figure out what we're going to do about that. Then there are a lot of ways that the polls could be wildly off because all of the old milestones or fence markers by which we would understand the state of the race have essentially all been upended. We just don't know. And how you feel doesn't mean no. One of the things that I hate the most about politics in the era of social media is that you'll have somebody who says, Donald Trump is going to win New York. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And then early tomorrow morning, a meteor will hit Manhattan, wipe out 20 million people, and New York will only be determined by people who voted in the 3 red counties in New York. And that person will say, see, I told you. I always knowed. Well, you didn't know crap, but you did happen to be right.
Jeremy, you brought up
that's not the same thing.
Abortion is one of the most important issues for Democrats. Trump's Supreme Court famously was responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. Now Trump is saying that he doesn't want to have any national abortion ban. Do you feel as though Trump is abandoning the pro-life cause?
Yes. I think that Donald Trump has never been comfortable in the pro-life movement. I don't think that Donald Trump himself has ever actually been a pro-life person. I don't think that he's run in pro-life circles. I think that he has not lived the kind of lifestyle that would reinforce pro-life values. I think that he is a transactional politician. He understood what the electorate needed from him to win as a Republican, and things happen very fast. It happens to be a sort of rebuke of the right that most of our way of dealing with abortion in my lifetime was essentially premised on the idea that we would never be able to win and overturn Roe.
I think you're right.
And so we
I remember it was settled law. That was the phrase around Roe v. Wade. Like it wasn't ever.
The left, the right never would have agreed it was settled law.
Yeah.
It was the fight to overturn Roe. But because the only fight was to overturn Roe, there's never been any conception of what would happen after the overturning.
Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg knew that it was a flawed decision.
Of course, it was a terrible decision.
Yeah.
But the result is that the pro-life movement in America has essentially existed to fight Roe v. Wade, and now we live in a post-Roe reality, and the right has not yet adapted. We have not yet figured out how best to champion life when it's now an actual issue in which voters are going to routinely have a say in. The beauty of Roe. Listen, Roe was a horrible piece of jurisprudence. It led to an actual kind of genocide of the unborn in this country. You couldn't be more pro-life than I am. Nevertheless, I'm telling you that Roe was of great political value to cynical right-wing politicians because it allowed them to be abortion absolutists politically without actually having to do anything to obviate abortion in the country.
I think Live Now rescinded the endorsement.
I'd like to make this point, and I would start by saying I consider myself traditionally pro-choice. I think abortion is wrong, but I think it's increasingly difficult to legislate properly. I don't know that I have the best answers, and I will stress with this disclaimer, this issue is the razor's edge. There's no middle road. I'm not smart enough to come up with a good answer, to be completely honest. I just don't know. What I can tell you is I do believe over a long period of time, the end result will be the complete abolition of abortion. And I mean that from a position of logic. That is, the 14th Amendment would have to be overturned, removed from the Constitution, or the Supreme Court has no choice but to follow its natural conclusion. That is, the unborn have the same rights under the Constitution, and every abortion would require a court adjudication with justification for the death of an individual. And I will stress this by reading Section 1 of the 14th. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Period. Now you can forget about that sentence because that's only one portion of this amendment, because often the left and liberals try to say, aha, but it says persons born. Only for that sentence. It then says next, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, semicolon, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. First, outside of the abortion question, this has already been ruled that non-citizens, tourists, illegal immigrants still have the same protections. That is, someone who comes here because they're visiting family cannot just be locked up without charge or trial. There has to be, they have free speech, they have these things. This means if the Supreme Court is to answer this question, are the unborn persons or citizens, the argument is, well, they're not born, so they're not citizens, but are they persons? At which point, scientifically, life begins at conception. I believe that the logic follows. If and I've asked this to many liberals. I've asked them, 2 women, 9 months pregnant. They both conceived at the exact same moments. They're twins, and they're married to twin brothers. The babies are identical. One woman gives birth. The other woman is still pregnant. An hour later, can the woman who is still pregnant abort that baby? And the response from the left is yes. Without question, it's her choice. Despite the fact the babies are identical, and the only thing separating them is the body of the mother, I then said, can you terminate the life of the baby that was born? The answer is no. Well, there's nothing legal or logical in that can be concluded. I believe that if the Supreme Court takes up this question, there is only one answer, and it's the unborn are person. At the very least, the argument is post-viability, but I believe whether you want it to be or not, and this is not me making an opinion argument, or I should say it's not my opinion or morals on the question of abortion. It is my view of how the Supreme Court will rule based on the 14th Amendment.
So I would agree with you that that's certainly the most logical choice, but I'm actually going to combine a thing Jeremy said and a thing Mary said, which I think are both accurate, which is firstly, the Republican Party did for a very long time run on abortion as an issue that they were never actually interested in doing anything about. It's not to say there weren't Republican politicians whose heart was in the right place and planned to. It's just for many of them, it was something that could be easily exploited. And then, Mary, you pointed out that abortion is necessary for the sexual licentiousness that dominates our culture to continue to flourish. And there's a phrase I like to use for this. These people, they really genuinely are lobotomized by their libido. They will go along with any insane policy prescription, including killing babies, if it means that they get to continue fooling around. There's actually a theory in anthropology that one of the ways you can determine whether a place is a brothel is whether there are infant skeletons nearby.
Whoa.
Yes.
Yeah, behind
because
every
it's
brothel is a
necessary.
graveyard. Mhm.
Yes, because it's absolutely necessary in order to continue this absurd fantasy that you can have a quote unquote sexual liberation that does not involve human beings living by the rules and laws of logic, settling down with one person, having a child with them, getting married, which is the most reasonable thing to do. Because we want to talk about sexual liberation. You are not free if you are not living in accordance with reason.
This is why I'm saying I don't have as much faith in the American people coming to the decision that we will not support this if it means partial birth or late-term abortion. They will not decide that. They have, I think, collectively decided this is the price for my sexual license. We will shed blood for our orgasm. Like, that is what they have collectively decided.
They've decided that today.
Exactly.
But it took this is the sad truth for my pro-life friends. It took 70 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. And we had no idea, as I said, we had no idea what we were going to do next. It's going to take at least a generation and maybe 2 generations to defeat abortion now that it's a political issue. It's going to have to be won culturally. It's going to have to be fought for politically. It's going to have to be thought through by a new generation of thinkers who aren't just thinking about how to use the courts to accomplish this one piece of the victory, but who are actually thinking about ways to legislate our way toward victory. It's going to be fought by the churches who have, American evangelicalism is in complete collapse right now. It's going to have to we're going to have to refine that footing. It's going to be probably solved in part technologically, because you're never going to have a society. I hate to say this, but, all of sin and fall short of the glory of God. I said it before. That's the line I came up with on the drive over. I think that I'll trademark it. But, the fact of the matter is that people don't just give up licentiousness, and you're never going to have a society that's free from licentiousness. But you are going to have a society where the age of viability moves back further and further and further and further with technological and medical advances. And the combination of all of that, I do believe, will ultimately, and God's grace, will ultimately result in the abolition of abortion. But it's not going to be decided like at the 2024 ballot box. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be determined in 2028. It's not going to be determined in 2032. We're going to have to fight and fight. We're going to win ground and lose ground. We're going to compromise and get blood on our hands. We're going to dislike ourselves because we have to engage in political compromise for the first time. And Republicans have never had to engage in political compromise on the issue of abortion because it's never been political. We could afford to be completely absolutist in our approach. I'm an absolutist in the ethic. I believe that abortion should be 100% banned in absolutely all instances. That's about as pro-life as you can get. 100% absolute abolitionist. But we're going to have to make political compromise. If I, for example, lived in California and somehow a Republican manages to get elected governor in that state again, and he's a Donald Trumpian Republican, and he comes up with a 14-week abortion ban, I'm going to freaking support it. Not because I agree with a 14-week abortion ban. I believe in a complete abolition of abortion, but I know you're not going to get that in California. And I'm going to live with having to face the fact that I live in a fallen world, having to face the fact that I have political responsibility in a fallen world. And I'm going to fight for every single life of every single child that I can until we figure out how to win this issue, which I believe is a generational struggle.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.